Despite a good fundraising stretch, Senate Democrats are still short on cash. With an assist from a former member, the minority took in close to $1 million during the first 6 months of this year. But the Democrats' failed effort to retain the majority last fall left them $3 million in debt. Now, loan payments and other expenses have depleted much of the money that they managed to take in, and they're still about $2 million in the red. Party leaders nevertheless say that they're very happy with the amount that they managed to raise, calling it a sign that voters are interested in giving the Democrats another chance in the majority. My next guest leads the party's fundraising efforts. He is Senator Mike Gianaris. He's joining me from New York City to parse the numbers. Senator, it is good to see you again. How you doing?
Good to see you, Liz. Thanks for having me back again.
My pleasure. So a little bit of a different topic, although we will get into the redistricting question because this is all sort of bound up together. We did just have Senate Deputy Majority Leader Tom Libbison last week to tout his numbers. Of course, the Senate Republicans managed to pull in close to $3 million, 2.7 if I'm not mistaken. So you guys almost $1 million, but the Republicans are challenging your number. They say that you got a big transfer from former Senator Brian Foley, about 90,000. So what's your response?
Well, as an initial matter, let me correct you. It's not almost $1 million. Our total receipts actually will be over $1.1 million, which goes to what the Republicans are talking about. They're just, I'm sorry they're upset we did so well, but the fact is we did so well. We had an unprecedented fundraising period for a minority party in the Senate, and we are well on our way to retiring the debt and well on our way to retaking the majority.
Well, actually, let's just parse this just a little bit more. You had a historic first 6 months as the minority conference, because I think that the Senate Republicans had a stronger 6 months, but not the first 6 months. It was actually leading up to the 2010 election, right? Is that right? I mean, just since we're getting statistics, it's like political baseball at this point.
Yep. Well, yes. Historically, the first filing period of the two-year election cycle is the slowest period, and what we have done is raised more than the Republicans did 2 years ago, by far, actually, in that first period. And so by raising by having receipts over 1.1 million, we have done something that the Republicans weren't able to do when they were in the minority, and we were able to retire a good chunk of our debt, although there's still a fair amount to go.
Let's just take this question quickly about Brian Foley. I mean, he is no longer in office. $90,000 is a pretty good chunk of change. I mean, doesn't this get to the question of what you're allowed to do with your campaign cash when you're no longer around? I mean, is it actually fair that you would take that money and not return it to your donors, but just give it back to, I don't know, your conference members, or if you're a lobbyist, you give it to other elected officials of your choice?
Well, in a way, he was giving it back to his donors. The DSCC last year gave a very large number directly to Brian Foley's campaign to help with his efforts. So in returning the excess funds, he was doing exactly what you suggest, which is returning it to where it came from.
Well, as a point of policy, though, would you like to see stricter campaign finance, things that would not allow, like, the lieutenant governor to use his campaign cash to pay rent, for example, or Senator Carl Kruger, who's also a member of your conference, $700,000 on legal bills,
Or allowing one individual like Michael Bloomberg to donate $250,000 to the Senate Republicans.
Okay.
Yes, I absolutely would like to see stricter limits, but it goes in both directions. And until the Senate Republicans say that they're going to abide by stricter limits, we're certainly going to avail ourselves of whatever is legal under the current laws.
Yeah, right. No unilateral disarmament. That's generally the rule, right? But as long as everybody plays by that rule, then you're never going to get the rules changed. I mean, Eliot Spitzer tried to change this rule. Remember, he said, okay, I'm going to limit my individual campaign contributions to $10,000, and then everybody else did it too, except then he raised money to help for the Democratic Party to help the Senate Democrats try and flip the chamber.
Well, we're certainly not going to see that kind of change as long as the Senate Republicans are in charge. Senate Democrats are on the record supporting a stronger campaign finance system. We're on the record supporting an independent redistricting platform. Republicans seem to have no problem promising that they support these things during election time and then turning their backs on it once they get into office. And that's a shame. What we need to see is stronger campaign finance rules. We need to see an independent redistricting process, and we need to get this state and its government especially moving in the right direction.
Okay, here's the biggest problem that you've got. It is true that more than $1 million is it's a very strong fundraising filing for you, and it's to your credit. You have a history of a lot of really strong fundraising. You ran statewide as Attorney General. You actually ended up not going all the way with that, but you have a history of that. The problem is that you've got an $800,000 bill paying off this loan. I mean, how are you going to address that?
Well, there's no question we inherited a very large debt from the previous DSCC administration, and it's going to take us some amount of time to get through that. And what we showed last week was that we're already making strides to do that, and we're going to be in very good position come the election year next year to compete everywhere where we need to compete. And given the political dynamic, I know you and I have talked about this before, we're very confident that in a presidential election year, with the downstate shift in population that's taken place, with the change in the counting of prisoners, that it's a political imperative that Democrats are retaking the Senate, and we're going to make sure we're in the best position politically to advance that agenda.
Senator, you said that you inherited this from the previous DSCC administration. That's actually Senator Jeff Klein, now the head of the Independent Democratic Conference. I mean, did you not sign off on this personally? My understanding is that all individual rank-and-file members of the conference, or most of them at any rate, are personally on the hook for this debt.
Well, I wasn't in the Senate last year. So
sorry, pardon me. You did not. As a candidate, you were not asked to sign off on this then?
I was not asked to sign off on the incurring of $3 million in debt. No, I was not. I was not part of the decision-making process.
I see. Okay. So, but you do have members like Senator Liz Krueger, for example, who is on the hook. I mean, if for some reason you guys default, that actually you have members who are personally responsible for this. Is that
correct?
Right?
That's been the case for probably a couple of decades in the Senate. The Democratic Conference has been doing that for quite some time, and it's typical practice, apparently.
Yeah. So do you believe that you're going to be able to pay off this $2.3 million worth of debt before the 2012 election gets joined in reality? I mean, actually, technically speaking, you're already fighting over it quite clearly, because I'm hearing the rhetoric that you and Senator Libous are giving me. But nevertheless, I mean, you got to, how much do you think it's going to cost? You always go through, I don't know, $2 million, $3 million. You're $2 million in the hole.
Yeah, we'll get there. And I think, you know, this first filing period was instructive for a lot of people, and we were going to be testing ourselves over this past 6-month period. The one thing we showed is that we will definitely retire the debt. We're well on our way to doing it aggressively. As we discussed earlier, the first filing period is traditionally the slowest. We expect that the numbers will accelerate as we get closer to 2012. And we will retire the debt and actually be in the point where we can compete in as many races as we need to retake the majority next year.
And how many do you think that is?
Oh, it could be. I mean, the playing field for us is fantastic. There's a number of Democratic seats that the Republicans hold right now that they have no business holding, and we expect that we can be competing in as many as 7 or 8 of their districts. We're looking forward to winning the lion's share of those. How
much assistance do you think you're going to get from Andrew Cuomo? I mean, again, talk about prodigious fundraising. He posted more than $9 million on hand, brought in more than $6 million. He's not even running for anything at this point. He's got these amazing, astronomically high poll numbers, but he said that he will be supportive. He didn't say endorse. He stopped right short of that. Of 4 Republicans who voted yes on same-sex marriage, some of those guys are actually your top targets. Mark Grisanti is one of them. Jim Alisi, another one. I mean, you want to get rid of those guys, don't you?
Yeah, well, we expect Democrats to be representing those districts after the 2012 elections are up.
Okay, well, how's that going to work?
The governor's the head of our party. He's done a phenomenal job to the point where he's being talked about nationally as one of the best governors in the country, and rightfully so. We expect that as the leader of our party, we'll be working hand in hand with him through next year's election cycle to make sure that Democrats retake the Senate. Okay,
but what does that mean? I mean, do you expect that he would actually endorse someone against Jim Alisi when Jim Alisi, for example, really took a dangerous leap? I mean, he lost the Conservative Party line. So did Mark Grisanti in a very Democrat-dominated district. I mean, so did Steve Salan. So did Roy McDonald.
Well, as much as I like you, Liz, I'm not going to tell you our strategy a year in advance of these elections. But rest assured, we'll be talking with the governor and his political team, and we look forward to working hand in hand with them. We expect we'll have a very cooperative and very productive campaign season working with them.
Okay, and just in closing, you know, Senator Libous, and I'm sure that you saw this, said that he thinks that even if there is redistricting, and of course there will be, in some way, shape, or form, there will be new lines. We just don't know who's going to end up controlling them. Will they be vetoed? The governor said they will. He said even with the Democrat-dominated districts that we expect will be drawn in 2012, he thinks that the Republicans can still win.
I noticed a little laughter in your question.
Well, I think that most people don't, because most people agree. Even the governor in a recent interview said, look, you know, it's going to be very difficult, actually. If this is not the general gerrymandered process, you've a more than 5-3 statewide advantage for Democrats to Republicans. Yeah. Those are numbers. That has nothing to do with ideology.
You're talking about the fact that even in last year's elections, we saw 240,000 more votes cast on the Democratic line for state Senate candidates than the Republican. They only have the majority, not because the people voted that way, but because they've had gerrymandering. But be that as it may, the important thing to remember about independent redistricting is it's not about achieving a political end. It's about doing the right thing by the people. That's why the good government groups have lined up in support of it. That's why the editorial boards have lined up in support of it. It's the right thing to do for our state's democracy, and we shouldn't be rigging the process to advance a Republican or Democratic agenda.
Well, and I expect that you're going to try and force that issue because now the Senate and the Assembly have to come back to Albany and approve that PEF contract, assuming that the rank and file does the same. So I expect that you will probably try and push the issue. Is that correct? I saw this, the minority leader wrote a letter about that today.
Right, we were advancing that just today, as a matter of fact. We're ready at a moment's notice to go back if the governor sees fit to call a special election to address independent redistricting, or if we just come back to take care of other business. There's no reason why we can't, again, vote for what we all promised to do during the elections last season, establish a fair process, establish an independent process that will best represent the people of the state of New York.
Well, Senator Gianaris, I look forward to seeing you in Albany. It might be a little cooler, actually, than New York City. Thanks very much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Liz. I look forward to getting back up there.